And Jesus turns to him and says, "Get behind me, Satan." Now, he's not calling Peter himself Satan, because we see the very next phrase here. We have to keep these kind of in context. He says, verse 33, For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Yeah. He's saying Satan is warping your thinking. Satan is warping your thinking. Satan is greatly influencing Peter's thinking here, trying to foil the plan of redemption. This is very, very reminiscent of Matthew chapter 4, where Satan tries to tempt Jesus Christ. Satan is completely against the idea of a suffering servant, of Jesus Christ suffering as a sacrifice. Satan is completely against that idea, and we see that in Matthew chapter 4, at the bottom of our front page of passages, 4, 8 through 10. This is the third temptation. We're starting in verse 8. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, and he said to him, all these I will give you. I'm not sure he had the power to do that, but he was going to try to anyhow. All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, Begone, Satan, for it is written, You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Satan was at least saying that he was fine with Jesus being a king. He was fine with Jesus being a political king. He had no problem with that. He wanted nothing to do with the plan of redemption, though. He's saying, can Jesus just forego God's plan? Forego obeying your Father? Forego the cross? Forget about all that stuff. Skip over all of that. Bow down and worship me, and I will make you a king right now. You can go right to kingship right now. And Jesus, of course, rebukes him, just like he's rebuking him now. He's rebuking Satan, and he's rebuking Peter right now, calling Peter's thoughts satanic. And so very strong words here. You are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. 1 Corinthians 1:18, on the flip side of our page here. 1 Corinthians 1:18. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. The word of the cross is foolishness. People hear about Jesus' plan. People hear about the plan of redemption. People hear about the fact that the greatest king ever had to die to atone for the sins of his enemies. And people say, this is foolishness. This is folly. This would never ever happen. This is an impossibility. And this is what Peter is thinking. Peter is thinking what scores of people ever since have thought. This is foolishness. This is why this is why I know in the back of my mind that growth at Grace Church might be very, very slow. We hope to make many, many friends. We hope to be kind to many, many people. But I know that the moment they come in and they hear the preaching of the cross, they're just like, this is foolishness. This is foolishness. And we may never see them again. I hope that doesn't happen, but I do know that many times this is people's reaction to the foolishness of the cross, to the sound of the cross, to the teaching of the cross. They say this is foolishness. But to those of us who are being saved, it is everything. Right. It is essential. Anything else can be taken away from us. We absolutely need the cross. We absolutely need the cross of Jesus Christ, and it is the power of God to us. And so Jesus is saying here, you are not setting your mind on the things of God. You are not setting your mind on God's plan. What does he mean? What are the things of God? Jesus lays this out for us in verse 31. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed and after 3 days rise again. These are the things of God. This is God's plan. This has got to be very, very frustrating kind of words. These words have got to be very, very frustrating to Peter as he hears this idea of Jesus saying, I must be killed. I must be killed, because that's like a voluntary. It's not like Jesus is saying, you know what, probably going to die for this. It's not like Jesus is saying, I'm going to teach all this stuff, I'm going to offer this salvation, I'm going to offer this whole revolutionary way of thinking about God, and I'm probably going to end up dead. Jesus is not saying that. That's like what a martyr would say.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, happens. Jesus is not saying whatever happens, happens. Jesus is saying, I've got to die. I'm going to die. I am going to die. It's a huge, and that's got to just grate at Peter. That idea that Jesus has resigned himself to die. It's a very, very interesting thing to be thinking about, especially if you try to get inside Peter's mind and him hearing this the first time. And he's hearing this for the very first time, and he's like, this is ridiculous. The most powerful man I've ever known is telling me that some religious and political leaders are gonna end him. This can't be right. This can't be right. Peter must be thinking. This willingness is probably a big problem for the disciples. And we know. Okay, it's very difficult for us to know just how much Jesus knew. But we know he was in constant communion with his Father and that he had complete understanding of Old Testament scriptures. Jesus knew who he was. Jesus knew who he was. Jesus, and Jesus, his knowledge of who he was completely and perfectly informed by the Old Testament. And Jesus knew that not only was he the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and was he going to sit on the throne of David forever, but he also realized that the Messianic rule, the Messianic reign of Jesus Christ, that God's kingdom starts with the atonement of his people's sins. That no one actually enters God's kingdom unless their sins have been forgiven, unless they've been paid for, unless they have been redeemed. If redemption has not happened, then there will be then you will not enter into the reign of Jesus Christ. And so this is why we have Isaiah 53 here. Isaiah 53, if Peter and the disciples and the scribes and the Pharisees had any understanding of what was going on here in this passage, they would have not balked at Jesus at all. If the disciples would have understood this passage right here, that the Son of God was this suffering servant right here, this sacrificial lamb, if they understood that that's one and the same person, this would never have been a problem for them. Isaiah 53, and we're going to go, this is quite a lengthy passage. We're going to go through this for a few minutes together tonight. Who has believed what he has heard from us? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he, this is Jesus, grew up before him like a young plant, and like a root out of a dry ground. This is like he's coming out of an area and a background that seems like no big deal. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. There's nothing special physically about Jesus. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised and we esteemed him not. Jesus is not only no big deal, he's actually actively rejected and despised by his contemporaries. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his stripes we are healed. Jesus Christ was crushed for our iniquities. We looked at him and said, this man is cursed by God. And he was. But he was cursed by God on our behalf. For our sins. For our iniquities. Jesus is saying, have you read Isaiah 53? I must die. If there's ever going to be a kingdom, if there's ever going to be a reign, if there's ever going to be a family of God, if the family of Abraham is ever going to bless the families of the world, if the Old Testament is ever going to be true, I must die. I must die. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. We are all born sinners, and we're all in desperate need of redemption. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, and as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people? And they made his grave with the wicked, and with a rich man in his death, although he had done no violence